Hello and welcome to another Breaking Conservatarian broadcast with your favorite conservatarian, Jeff Charles. And today I have another fire guest for you. He hails from Petersburg, Virginia. He is the founder of popglitz.com, and he is the co-founder of the Petersburg GOP. I've got JaVonni Brustow. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great.
Good. How are things out there in Virginia tonight?
Pretty good. I was out door knocking yesterday for about 4 hours in the rain, something like that. And then I decided, as if that wasn't enough, to come home and do 4 miles on a treadmill, and I don't feel like my body's ever recovered from that.
I mean,
that's where
doing the door
now.
knocking already sounds like enough exercise, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know, I'm a masochist, so.
Right. Well, I mean, I got to ask the obvious question. How much coffee have you had today so far?
How much coffee? I haven't kept track. This might be number 3, might be 4. I'm not sure.
You are the only person I know that drinks coffee at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. I don't get it at all, but
I will get up and have a cup at 12 or 1. Yes. I do that. I actually start my day at exactly midnight. And I
really?
think, I think that as a writer, and the fact that web traffic just starts over at 12, just in my head, I automatically start my clock off that way.
That makes sense. I don't know how you sleep. I mean, back in the day, when I was younger, I worked at a coffee shop, so I drank coffee all the time. So it got to where it doesn't affect me, and I could just drink a cup of coffee and just go right to sleep. But I can't do that anymore because I don't drink it anymore.
Yeah, sometimes getting a little older can be a little tougher. Every so often, it doesn't necessarily work the way that it used to. Before I came down here to Petersburg, I've been down here for about 3 years now. Working in DC, I had started getting sick drinking coffee, and that's never happened before. I do have to actually pace myself a little bit. My coffee drinking's been worse before.
Yeah, you got to do it in moderation, I guess. but yeah, just to get started. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you've been doing, all that good stuff.
All right. So as I said, I'm finishing about 3 years in this region. I'm about 2 in Petersburg. I was in neighboring Hopewell for the first year. And the way that I got involved into politics here is that I was politically engaged in DC. I first became a Republican back in 2011 or 12. And at the time, I worked with one campaign, and then since then, no one wanted to run for office as a Republican. I had, every excuse was made for why we shouldn't do it. And I also worked in a mayor's office for a smaller municipality in the area. So I have my experience as far as knowing how government works. So when I'm giving my advice and pointers, it's because I actually know what I'm talking about.
Right.
But I basically surmise most of what I do to stepping up when no one else wanted to. So I came here. I wasn't really involved for the first year in Hopewell. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to be involved in politics. There was a bit of a scandal where they felt like there was some election funny business. They felt like writing illegal ballots. Like half of the names on the ballot were in all caps, which is the equivalent of circling a name and saying, vote here.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a campaign manager for a candidate in Hopewell who helped have the majority of the electoral board removed by the state. And I came into that position in the sense that I told him, after you got through this, you did such a great job when no one else wanted to do anything about it. You have my promise that I'll help you if you decide to do anything else. And yesterday I told people, and here I am as his campaign manager, out door knocking in the rain. And
nice.
In a city that I don't live in. So this was Hopewell, where I lived for the first year. So my work is more so regional. So that's, again, me managing a campaign over there. And of course, I still have to find candidates for races in my city in Petersburg.
I see. Okay. And whose campaign are you running in Hopewell?
The candidate is Brandon Howard. He is probably I I've said that I started working with him because when again no one else wanted to address anything, he was the person who did, and he tends to be the loudest one in most
That's good.
cases. And it's a blessing and a curse because not necessarily all the time everyone likes it. Not necessarily all the time I like it. It's nice to work with someone who makes press, you know, and then sometimes the press days aren't always the best ones.
Right.
So, but with that being said, I told others that, okay, but no one else was getting up to do anything about any of this stuff. You've had years to do something about this. So now that we're here doing this, you're welcome to work with us. If you don't like something we're proposing, everyone has my contact information. I
Right.
knock on doors and people say, well, I've seen you on Facebook. I've seen you somewhere. Can't search the city's name on social media and not find me somewhere.
Well,
Um,
that's good.
so with that being said, we're here. We are the channel. The line of communication is open if you want to have some discourse. But again, he stepped up when no one would do anything, and the same thing with myself as far as working with his campaign. I told him recently, I said, there are plenty of other people I'm certain that you could have had to be in this position, but um, here I am. I was a reindeer for Christmas in the city parade. We won for the best float, mind you, in the Christmas parade. And I was
Did you have to
scheduled.
pull the float since you were a reindeer, or?
So, yes, even though we weren't actually pulling, the foot was on the gas. We were pulling a car, actually.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
We're having a picnic over the weekend, and I was originally scheduled to be knocked into a dunk tank, which has been scrapped. Not by
Well,
my doing, but I said, if hey, for the re-election, we can do that. We had some logistical
that's
issues.
dedication right there. That is dedication. Getting dunked into a dunk tank, and I'm sure it's cold out there right now. So
Yeah, I was called about it, and I said, you're lucky. You're lucky that I really support what you're doing.
so let me ask you, for what office is he running?
For city council.
Okay. Okay. And so you mentioned that there were certain things that people weren't addressing, and that's why he stood up. But what were the issues that people were not addressing?
So for one, the incumbent is in her 80s, and no one has. Most people don't know what she looks like. They've not seen her, and it's. I would I would say that a lot of small town politics. People aren't looking at it. They're not expecting anyone to pay attention. So
Mm-hmm.
things happen, complaints get overlooked because, well, who cares? It just
Right.
doesn't make any difference. No one's paying attention
No
um,
accountability. Yeah.
to anything like the city council meeting minutes. I was telling, I think the mayor that I said, they're just like voting records. It's nothing. I read this and I don't know what you talked about by looking at this. Um, just very lackadaisical. I mean, I look at the plans for the city in the future, and just as many other Black cities. I mean, this one's more 50-50, but they're
Okay.
plans. And so I always talk about gentrification. And so I stress the need for people to be politically involved. But again, just very lazy politics, lackadaisical. There were complaints about trash not being picked up
Mm-hmm.
for months. I mean, it's being picked up, but there are people who didn't have theirs picked up for, a week or two, multiple times. You can imagine what having smelly trash in front of your house is like. And one of the
Yeah.
neighbors asked me, what is your obsession with trash? I said, excuse me?
What?
I think that's kind of a problem. What do you mean, like, what's the issue?
What you should
Ma'am,
have done is brought all your trash over to their house and put it in front of their house and been like, "Hey, what's the problem with the trash?"
I actually teased the idea of bringing all your trash to the steps of City Hall, but knowing how they are, they would have called. Well, they would have called the candidate and said, "Sir, I don't think your campaign manager should be doing that." But my candidate was a part of spearheading the city becoming a Second Amendment sanctuary city. You know, that was the thing in Virginia.
Okay,
And
yeah, I remember that.
yes, he was one of those who did that. Not everyone's necessarily a fan of, you know, the 2A people. It's sort of a split city. Um, you know, folks just don't like seeing people open carrying, but, you know, I've described it as a person had just held an argument with a candidate saying that it doesn't appear professional. And I said, well, you know, that's like an argument of like sagging pants. You know,
Right.
people try to make that illegal and say that it's not professional, but I don't think that's the government's job to be determining what's professional or not, to make things illegal.
Right. Right. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you mentioned, I wanted to go back to this, so that you became a Republican back in like 2011 or so. What prompted that decision?
I excuse me, I was working in, it was very odd. I was working in mental health at the time. I had just started working in this office, and it was a very political environment in the sense that I happened to share an office with someone who was managing a city council campaign. And then down the hall around the corner, my future business partner was also doing the same thing for another part of the same city. And fast forward a couple years, the office manager just ran for mayor of another neighboring city. But I was invited to a Republican event, and I was impressed at the fact that I was invited to go out there, and the someone who was running to become the Republican National Committee woman had met with me, and basically, I'll just say that as a citizen journalist at the time, I tagged along to some of these campaigns,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't an immediate sell. I mean, for one, it was nice to speak to these people and meet them, but I didn't officially change my party registration for about a year. And it's the same point that I
Yeah.
generally make, that you have to go into these communities, speak to people, and I spoke to a lot of people before I actually
Right.
made my mind. I wasn't sure. You know, what people's motives were. But as someone who's worked in DC for the longest in the public and private sector, I've been around in and around government long enough to realize that it's the problem, and that most issues that I can pinpoint in a city, I can find an action of the government that caused it.
Right.
So,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
and particularly, you know, going back into history and understanding why some of these communities um, are the way that they are. And my again, future business partner had explained to me the history of some of these neighborhoods, because I was very pro gentrification at the time. Like I
Mm.
was entering the hood literally with the thought process of, or practically saying that they needed to mow all this stuff down. And she said, Vonnie, you can't say that. This is people's homes. People live
Yeah.
there. You can't do that. You know, and I can understand how there are certain people, certain pundits who have this very flat look at certain people, because they have no regards for the people who are there, or don't care to understand what happens. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
just, all they think of is, well, nothing happened in X number of decades, which isn't true either. So,
Mm.
as I said, it took some time, you know, a lot of learning, a lot of studying, um, but I was able to come around. And again, for a lot of the work that I had done in government, in thinking that I was solving a lot of things, then I started to realize what type of harm that I was a part of
I see.
implementing as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. So before you became before you became a Republican, were you involved in politics like you are now, like campaigning and things like that, or did that kind of start after you changed?
Not at all. And in fact, I got into politics because I was outside of work, I was a celebrity news writer. And
Right.
it was this person in my office who just approached me one day and said, why don't you write about something that matters? And I will never forget that. Like, I was like, oh, like it just knocked the wind out of me. Like, God, that was I never forgot that. I think that I went home and launched a website that night or something, a political website. I was serious. Like I had a meeting with someone, I think by the end of the week, and I had a new site. And we were advising on, I was getting advice on what to write about and whatnot. Um, that was how it started. And actually, and it was really, the involvement was kind of not, I won't say that it was in a trolling manner,
Right.
but at about that time period in 2011, as I was going around as a citizen journalist, sort of covering what's happening and not necessarily like the policy part of things, I would meet elected officials and then they would go to jail. I was shaking someone's hand and then they would go to jail. And it was just left and right. And people kept getting caught doing ridiculous things. So-and-so has his coffee brought to him in the morning. In his coffee mug, instead of coffee, it's filled with rolled up $100 bills. And I'm like tweeting about this thing.
That is some good coffee.
That is hilarious. What are you doing? The council member who has this guy lives in one of the richest neighborhoods of the city, Chevy Chase, DC, and yet he
Right,
can't.
yeah.
And then he was arrested for driving without a license or a suspended license. And I said, wait a minute, you mean to tell me, I'm taking a cab across the city. Why the hell is he? Why can't he do that? And I know that he has the money. Well, the guy, then he's exposed for, all of his money going to the mistress in her couple $1,000 a month apartment to the side. But that was how it started. And these days, as you can tell from my writing, it's matured a little bit. So those were all distractions, funny distractions. But I understand, of course, the importance of focusing on things that actually matter. As I was told back then, it just took a while.
Right, focus on what matters. But I mean, when you start working in politics and you see all that corruption, especially when you just start, did that make you feel jaded at all, or did that kind of just have a different impact on you, or?
I mean, I was learning, and I've always looked at this as a learning experience. And I mean, while I'm looking at all of this, and I realize that these are all things that are happening oftentimes to cover up for something else. And so I'm meeting with as many people as possible to try to understand part of, what it is that's actually going on. I mean, I have witnessed, like even here when I came to Petersburg, and I let people know that we're looking at this area and you don't feel like things are happening. And so people don't vote. They choose to not get involved. And as much as possible, I try to get involved in the political process. And I show in DC, I've seen people, the police have hauled folks out of community meetings for jumping up and down, screaming at the top of their lungs. The chair of one of the ward Democrat groups, I heard just someone's hollering and screaming, saying that so is a white man from PG County. How dare he? And I turned around and this guy literally jumped up like some Olympic jump. How dare he run for office here? And I'm thinking I was in mental health. So maybe it's someone on PCP or something that just happened to wander in the room. Oh no, that's the chair of the Ward 4 Democrats. Interesting. Is it easy to be jaded in it? If I didn't actually care about what was happening, possibly. But as I said, I went around and I would pick projects, such as my business partner told me that there was no affordable housing in the district. I went out on foot, determined to go and find this and to prove to her that there was affordable housing. And this went on for several months. With me, I learned what is it, LIHTC properties, low-income housing tax credit properties are, and said this is, affordable housing. Then we argued about what the definition of it was. This is subsidized by the government. It doesn't necessarily count. So, again, if you have an actual goal and a focus that you are working towards, such as the betterment of your community, which should be all of our focus. A lot of people, it doesn't appear to be so. Trolling seems to be a little more important than the gotchas,
You got to own those libs.
Yes, but I think that because I had a decent focus of what I was trying to do and accomplish, I've been able to stay in there, even though I do wake up many a day with profane rants about why? But it's been worth it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because I think anybody who's in this world, I mean, even be from, a commentary perspective, it's easy to get jaded with some of the things that I see, but it is my ultimate objective that kind of keeps me going and pushing past that. So I totally get what you're saying there. That actually, I hadn't thought about it that way before until you just said it, that is what keeps me going, knowing what I'm here for.
I add that,
Um,
it's to your benefit to know what's happening. I mean, as someone who came of age during the recession or right before that, and I was warning people around me. I worked in real estate, but I think this is happening. You should maybe, as a teenager, I'm saying you should invest in like a 4-unit building to save some money. And they're saying, oh, you think money grows on trees? No one paid attention to me. I watched how people were destroyed financially around me. And so I always had the thought process of to see it before it comes to get me, however that goes.
right.
So to at least have a good economic understanding, and so that does tie into politics. So if you understand that it's elected officials who largely have a part in the development around you, then you can have an idea of what is happening that could affect you. You know,
Right.
I had a moment where I walked outside one day and I saw a sign for townhomes, I think that were 700,000 some years ago. This is the late 2000s.
Mhm.
And I just remember seeing that. And again, that's just paying attention. I said, oh, what does that mean? Because that likely is going to mean, a higher, higher, rent for my area or whatnot. And again, if you pay attention to meetings and whatnot, all of these things are proposed beforehand.
Right.
And so again, it's a part of the politics tying into economics. And it's not just being a neighborhood busybody. These things do actually affect you. So
Yeah, and it's funny because it just seems like, we're always so concerned about what goes on in the presidency. And, when something happens at the local level, we think it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. I mean, this stuff was talked about, debated about, agreed upon, all without you knowing, because, I mean, this stuff doesn't the media isn't really going to cover a lot of this stuff. And unless you're focused on your local media and also participating in your meetings, um, then you're not gonna know. So I've been trying to emphasize that a lot, and I plan to actually get more involved here in Austin to see what's going on in this city. But it's always easy to lose sight of that. I mean, so it's good that you kind of learned that lesson early on to have more of the local focus, because I think if more of us did that, then
you wouldn't have
government, I mean,
surprises.
politicians on both sides wouldn't be able to get away with the things that they get away with.
Yes, and here in Petersburg, I live tweet all of our city council meetings. And then I take that and write about it, generally in an article just now, for now on Facebook. And then I've started putting it into a newsletter. And I just had a meeting with one of our city's leading advocates um, to discuss the fact that we both essentially are the two who follow city council the most. She mentioned something that happened in this 3-hour meeting. And so help me God, I was able to call off what page number that what she discussed was on out of a
Mm.
200-page agenda pack. It was 163. I was off. I think it was 167. That's how
Mm.
closely
Wow.
I pay attention to that. Because again, you can't get up and lie. If I sat here, I'm taking notes the whole time. And so I know what you all said you're working on. I can recite things. I can answer city council's questions for them that they ask. I said, this was discussed 2 meetings ago. I don't understand why this is your job that you're paid to do. Why don't you remember what you just said a couple weeks ago?
Right.
And it's all a part of accountability. So when I see these online discussions, I get to add my 2 cents because I know what happened, and they know not to question whether I know because I can go and pull up the tweet record of it.
Yeah. That's awesome. So you've got kind of a new venture there in Petersburg. I mean, with the Petersburg GOP. So why don't you talk a little bit about this venture that you're doing in Petersburg? I mean, you basically formed that party from scratch, right?
Yeah, it hadn't existed in about 6 or so years. And I told you I really wasn't sure if I wanted to be involved in politics. But excuse me, the way that we had decided to do this, we always hear about how there's just, and Sonny Johnson, I believe, just spoke over the weekend about the return on investment.
Right.
There was a film called Fear of a Black Republican.
Yes, I watched that a few months ago.
Okay, that was
Made me
great.
very angry.
A few months ago. So I saw that about 8 years ago, unless there was a sequel. I'm just
No,
saying.
it was the same one. I had
Okay.
heard of it, and then I was like, I need to watch this, so I watched it.
It was very good. And let me tell you, it's the absolute truth. I get that exact response about doing something in these communities. Like people say, "Oh, well, look at the math. There's no point. If I may as well take my resources and go somewhere else." Well, guess what resources we used to start this committee? Nothing. I mean, this was literally sweat equity going through contacts. And luckily, one of us in the group were from here and were able to, try to call up some of the old members, even though many were dead.
Oh God.
So yes, I met the former chairman, and he mentioned about all of this money that he spent, thousands of dollars. I don't know on what, but I mean, things are different these days. We have social media, etc.
Yep.
We're social people, and so versus spending outrageous amounts of money, likely in what sounds like a social club setting. Um, Basically, if you decide, and this is where I talk about your purpose, if you decide that this community is worth having a GOP party, then do it. And it's not as though you're just out in the wilderness, because I've never, in all the years I've been a conservative, I've never heard anyone on conservative media explain how to do this. No one,
Right.
ever. And I have it on television all day long. And I've worked at home for a good amount of that time. No one ever explains about what it actually takes to build a local party. And so it was much simpler than I thought. The district chairwoman, um, came to our meetings. I mean, she gave advice on what to do, and she's of course is over other committees in the area.
Okay.
I think I met all of the other chairmen, and some of them come to our meetings, and the chairs have their own call, monthly or quarterly or something. So there's plenty of support. So it's, again, really not as difficult as people make it out to be. And the fact that, this film was made where people just say it's just not worth it, and people always tell me it's just not worth it. Well, it's funny. We did it, and we're now pushing the Democrats to do things here. They just announced their first annual fundraiser. I said,
Uh,
what the hell have you all been doing? You've not had a fundraiser at all? Really? Um, but they've been on their toes. I mean, there were people who were practically they were trying to chase me out of the city. A number of people told me to leave.
I remember you tweeting about that.
Yes, it's ridiculous. I had my introduction with some people. They play revisionist history now, because now we all get along. Now they actually see that I'm doing things. And
Right.
so most of them have most have calmed it down. I can't say everyone. Um, it was the same way in DC. And so I just figured that, it was consistency. I was the Republican who would show up to all of the Democrat meetings. And I'd be asked
Oh.
why I was there. Well, got to know what's going on. I have to, got to interact and mingle. And so we're friends now. We had some very tough interactions, mind you, back in the day. So this is not my first time in going through this.
Right.
But as far as how to do it, we're not completely winging it, as there's plenty of support around if we have any question at all. But other than that, yes, we sort of are playing it by ear. We have our events, and other people from area committees come to it. People find us online. They're so thrilled to hear that there's a committee here. There are people who live outside of the city that donate just because they're just excited to see that something is happening there. Please, they beg us, please help Petersburg.
That's good.
Please,
That's
our
good.
businesses there. I tend to get along with folks on the council. I had the city manager come to my Christmas party. I told her that I 100% didn't expect her to come. I sent the invitation and laughed, saying that that it won't even be open. What the hell is this? How dare he?
He goes right into the trash.
Right. So it's not as bad as one would think. I get along with Democrats just fine. Again, the fact that I was door knocking in Hopewell. It's not just that I'm door knocking for a Republican. This was a 4-term chair, and someone who is a firebrand gun advocate.
Mm-hmm.
A firebrand gun advocate that some would even equate to some of this circle as being rednecks, I would say.
Okay.
And
like the militia types?
Yes. Well, not militia.
Not quite that far. Okay.
Yeah, not quite that far. But I'm always reminding people that we have a lot more in common than we would think. It's more that we have in common than we have apart. Some of the people who were accusing me of trying to spread the KKK in the area, because that happened too. We now agree on policy.
Oh, that's good.
It's, as I said, it's really not as bad as people would make it seem to be. Unless you're entering communities with the intent of trolling, you're not going to get this type of negative response that one would think. And I tell people that, look, I'm always being told about negative reactions online. And so I tell folks, back away from the computer, go outside, and go find something to do. Find something productive to do. I mean, someone was literally yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs and cursing and everything, some advocate over the weekend, and about some beef that I didn't care about. And I have a number of titles and a couple I didn't mention. But I said, with all that I'm doing, and I used to get into it with people, you see how I'm not, when I had lunch with a leading community advocate, I said, you see how I'm not getting into it with people? Because I have enough stuff to do to not do that.
Right.
And if all of us, with all the problems that are constantly going on here that everyone complains about, if more of us decided to be involved in things, you wouldn't be sitting on the internet arguing with people. Half the time, I watch you all for 3 hours. You sat and yelled for a whole hour, calling people out of their name. You could have been door knocking for an hour. And then we wonder why the same people keep getting reelected.
Yeah, some of those feuds on Twitter, I've seen them go on for days. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm on Twitter a lot, but I'm not going to engage with somebody on something for like a whole day. Like, I mean, after a while, I'm just like, I don't really have time for this. So let me just make a few jokes on Twitter.
I've done it before. I mean, I run a website, I have a PR company. It's like and with all of this, I tell people that if I didn't care about the community, I wouldn't be doing it. There's other things I could do with my time. But one of the other main things that I do, I'm a part of 2 community groups. One I started, Blacks in Petersburg, and the other one being Petersburg Solution. I'm the communications director for, which nonpartisan. And do you know the purpose of it is? There's so much negativity and nastiness of people complaining about what's happening in the city and all these negative facts. Well, we're talking about solutions over here. Policy. And with my marketing background, to try and paint the city in a better light. And I've started interviewing business owners and interviewing city council candidates. And so all of that is more so geared towards positivity and how to actually solve the problem. And I've had issues with trying to attract businesses here because they Google the city and they look at what the elected officials are doing and say, the hell, well, I don't want anything to do with it. The FBI's raiding departments, I don't want anything to do with that. They called the police on the treasurer because he was trying to check the petty cash drawer. The hell no. So, like these interviews, for instance, that I've done, could others do some better? I'm sure they could. Again, as with everything else, no one else wanted to do it.
Yeah, you're the one doing it.
Step to the plate to do it. I immediately got a response to an interview that I did with a coffee shop owner, I think on Friday, with someone literally within minutes. I don't even think I even posted the link of the YouTube video anywhere. And he said, oh, this is awesome. We need to meet. which I think I have to schedule now. So it. I, for one, like to say that I'm not all that partisan because I believe in solutions. I worked in municipal government
Yep.
before, so I've been to these conferences and have met a lot of the municipal organizations and tech companies that work to build cities. So, it's more important to actually engage people and to actively be doing things than to try to beat people over the head with this elephant umbrella, be
Right.
Republican,
Right.
that can be a little tiring, again, which is the reason why, as much as possible, we try to have other forms of engagement.
I see. Okay. Okay. And so as far now, you mentioned that like the demographics of Hopewell are more like a like 50-50 black and other races. What about Petersburg? Is that about the same or?
No, and Hopewell has a very strong Republican base there, also.
Okay.
So so you can have an easy door knocking campaign if you want. Which is another thing for those who keep saying like, how are Republicans supposed to do something in these cities? What
Right.
about what about tax or something? One, you can get a list of Republicans, and if you're so afraid, you can just knock on the doors of registered Republicans. No one's
Yeah.
telling you to go out into enemy territory. However, of course, because I have such an exuberant candidate, I'm knocking on every door in Hopewell.
Right.
I was riding over to his house while it was raining. It was a Sunday morning, and I said, "Oh, I just realized it was raining. Do you think we're still going to do it?" And I was told, if anyone is going to door knock in the rain, it's Brandon Howard. And sure enough.
Right.
But again, they have a nice, strong Republican base. Petersburg, new. Now, for many of these cities, there's plenty of Republicans,
Yeah.
but they're just they just show up as votes. No one's seen them. It takes us actively having, and it's about, well, the city's 75% black. As far as the percentage of Democrat, I'm sure it's up there. Sure it's up there pretty high. But the more that we're out and actually tell people that we're Republican, et cetera, people are thrilled.
They're thrilled to have you come up and say, "Hey, I'm a Republican. Can we talk?"
Or some are, or some will say that they might be closet Republicans who over here, and that's how that worked. Our chairman has like 3 Republican signs outside, and would I have a Trump sign outside? Maybe not. I'm in an apartment, so I can't. But he said multiple neighbors who are like, "Oh my God, I want one."
Wow.
So I tell people that the closet Republicans are out there. I speak to these people all the time. I can find them on Facebook. Whoever's yelling about just Democrats did this and Democrats did that. That's not hard to find. So I know this.
So let me get this straight. So you're in a predominantly black city. You're a Republican, and you've talked to other Republicans as well. But you also get along with Democrats in the area. They know you're a Republican. So how many times have you gotten beaten up or thrown out because you're a black Republican or called a coon or
I have
what
never
have you?
been beat up. I I want to say I'd like to see that happen, but that's probably not something I want to have on tape. I've invited the same person who kept accusing me of trying to promote the KKK. I literally kept giving him invites to meetings of mine and said, "Look, we're going to discuss this in person. Stop it. The meeting's on Thursday. I'll see you there." He said, "You don't want me there. I'm a different kind of," and I said, "I am too. I'm sick of it." And I did have, which is sad, I tried to reach out as much as possible, but there was someone I didn't recognize once. It was a black guy sitting in the middle of the room, and I didn't know who they were, and I was looking at them, and I was saying during the meeting, "Is that guy I kept inviting?" It wasn't.
Oh.
It was one of my followers who said that he wanted to come and see what I was doing. But yeah, I've never, because I always say that I don't disrespect other people, so there's no reason for anyone to disrespect me. I've had only one person's door who I've knocked on who was not a fan of my candidate, and we actually had a very good conversation. Um, and she, well, we had a very good conversation. She said that she liked me, um, but it was able to, in a cordial way. When I attend things, people know my stance, but yeah, I've never had that problem. And I hate to say it, but I often feel that the people who are getting these outrageous reactions tend to be the ones trolling. They're the ones who are going out poking the bear that are getting this to happen. It has never happened to me. I don't see it happening. I invite folks to stuff all the time, who take issue with me, especially those who do the online name calling. Okay, give me a
Right.
date and a time and a location, and we will finish this in person. I'm not doing this back and forth. And you think that they would actually go along with it, I
Yeah.
threatened to have someone, when I had my first meeting, I was concerned that a woman who was fired as this is my first bit of involvement here, as the registrar in Hopewell for that whole funny ballot situation. She said,
Right.
"Oh, they're starting a GOP meeting." They were laughing online. Ha ha ha! We should show up. I said, "Oh, you can come. Everyone's welcome. I actually invite Democrats to my meetings all the time." I said, "Oh, you can
Nice.
come. Yes." I said, "You can come, but if you start any trouble, I will physically remove you out of this building." Kind of a heavy set woman. She said, if you can move all of this, then you got my respect." I said, "I'm telling you, if you so much as look like you want to act up, I will remove you out of this building. Try it." I take
And
what
so
I do
obviously
very
nothing happened.
seriously.
Yeah. And the reason I was asking that is because, I mean, it's a huge misconception. I've had two other interviews with somebody who ran for office or is involved in politics in Chicago, a Black Republican. I got a guy in Baltimore who's running for city council. And I asked him that same question. They gave me basically the same answer. I mean, when people, and these are in predominantly Black areas, and when they find out that they're Black Republicans, they don't have any problems with it.
Yeah. Can I take a guess of who you interviewed in Baltimore? There's about 3 people, and I
Yeah.
know one of them's name. One I think is named JaVonni. Is that who you interviewed? No.
Well, yes, but he actually has your name, JaVonni. He just spells it differently.
I was right. Ha! I'm good.
Cool guy.
See,
It
I
was a
pay
very
attention. We follow each other on Twitter.
yeah. See, and his interview is already up on YouTube, so check it out. But yeah, the guy's solid. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. But it's the same principle. I mean, you go on there and show respect. You listen, have conversations. You're not going to get called out of your name like that. You might have a few people who act up.
Right.
So like, and you've talked a lot about that as well. But I mean, but overall, people, whether they agree with you or not, you can still have conversations and at least get your ideas out there without having to fear.
And you, again, would be surprised that I say all the time that myself and my Democrat friends, that we all tend to want the same things. We
Right.
complain about some of the same stuff. And sometimes the solution of it, we might disagree on. But I know many Democrats who promote conservative policy. There are
Yeah.
people who don't want the label of Republican. And one of my Democrat friends calls me all the time, and she says that I give her hope for the party. And I think
That's
she's
good.
independent. But you have a few who pull through for me. One wants me to be involved in the Lincoln Project. I said no. Um, but otherwise, yeah, she just doesn't like the president. But we have very healthy debates on policy, and again, in myself and neighbors around, we tend to get along. It's just sometimes people can't get over the party label, or again,
Right.
one person's trying to beat the other over the head. But at
Right.
least how to have a civil discourse, know when to leave something alone, for
Right.
instance.
Right. Gotcha. So here's a question that I have. I mean, I hear Sonny Johnson talking about Virginia a lot. and just the issues with the GOP there. What do you feel like are the biggest or the most glaring examples of things that the GOP is doing wrong in that state? Because we've seen it turn blue, and I'm kind of asking this question at a little bit of selfishness, because I'm in Texas and I'm concerned about that happening here in the future.
I see. Well, for one, outside of being one of the executive team members of the Petersburg GOP, there's the Tri-Cities Young Republicans, and I'm a vice chair of, which is over 3 jurisdictions. So we lost the House. We're practically a blue state now, essentially because Republicans did not vote. And so when we look at the reason why people didn't vote, I would say that the Hopewell is an example. The GOP was pretty small. And then I remember the day after election day, and I'm the one literally who I try to put on my calendar I have the selfish goal of reminding everyone when meetings happen, right? In multiple jurisdictions, which is kind of someone else's job, but I'm just doing it to try to help the overall goal, for whatever reason, I feel like doing other folks' job, hey, it is what it is. It helps in the end. But the day after the election, in Hopewell, I remember all of these people online who were complaining about, oh my God, Virginia has fallen, and all of this outrage. And as I'm looking at all these people, and I never really got a chance to do it, but I said, I'm going to contact each and every one of them and ask them, why the hell are you not going to any of the meetings here? You're so outraged and upset about, what the Democrats do. I didn't even know there were that many Republicans in the city. And here you all are, all at one time to express your outrage. So that's just the state of one party. We did not, one committee. We did not have a Republican committee in Petersburg for that long. And again, so much of this being done from scratch. I think that the state party should actually check on each one to see how they're doing. Just send someone to drive around, just or call someone. How are you doing? How is this doing? And to help those who have some weaknesses. But I think that they likely don't know that there are, some parties that are weaker than others, that some don't know what they're doing. They need help with creating a website, or, this group can't raise money. This one can't get people to show up, just to offer that type of support. And it's not saying that you have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that is an argument that when I mention this, for instance, on social media, people saying, oh, why do you want to be helped? You're supposed to be doing it yourself. You're being a Democrat asking for money. No, because so much of this does not involve that. I have shown many others how to do social media, how to, do online marketing, etc. I'm door knocking for a couple other campaigns as well. I think I know at least a Senate campaign, possibly a congressional one. I'm gonna make sure I fit that in. The election's coming up kind of close. But again, that's me checking to see what neighboring jurisdictions need. And that's what the state should do. So all I'm saying is just look around and make sure that everyone's doing fine. And again, I've heard from the state party chair who's no longer the chair, probably for obvious reasons, that when election day came, they put their resources where it was needed. And so, yes, you're looking at just the numbers, but again, I'm talking about technical support. Just as far as some of the basics of running a party. The fact that we did so much from scratch. It was very nice, of course, that we were able to have the district chair to help. But again, the state party could just do their rounds and make sure that the party as a whole is up to par, because I don't know if I've ever seen anyone from my state party yet, and we've been around for about 18
Okay.
months. So,
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like there's a disconnect between the state party, but then also the local parties as well. There's not as much support coming from the state party, so they're not really in tune with what's going on the ground.
mhm.
And actually, I didn't even know what you had said. What you said before, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was because Republicans just didn't show up to vote. That tells me something. I mean, it does speak to what you just said, because had the state party been more involved in what was going on
And
the
a lot of
ground.
races just didn't have candidates at all. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, that was a lot of it. And so, uh, you can pick up the phone, and there are areas that don't have committees. And for a Petersburg to not have a committee for so long, if I'm just thinking, if I were part of the state party, what would I do? I would pick up the phone and ask those in the area, do you know of a Republican that would be interested in starting this committee?
Right.
And possibly ask them, if you don't want to do it, to pick up the phone and call registered Republicans.
Hmm.
And it literally is that simple. You have a list of phone numbers. Start with that. And as a district chair, I promise that you know someone. And again, but again, they're busy. They do a lot. I know that my district chair does a lot. And throw them some help. Throw them an extra person
Hmm.
to try and get that done. But Petersburg was a part of a whole in this district, um, on the Republican side. And so hopefully by having us activated and getting more people involved in voting, et cetera, that we can possibly be able to help and turn the state back around red again. And again, it's
Gotcha.
just a missing hole, and and the goal is to try to have someone to help in filling that goal. It doesn't mean that we're standing around with our hand out for money, which of course we
Right.
wouldn't turn down. But again, this
Yeah, of
all of
course.
this is all of this is just about logistics and technical support. That's all.
Huh. That's interesting. That is very interesting. I mean, it sounds like there needs to be a lot more of what you're doing in other areas of Virginia.
Yes.
Yeah. But you're only one person. You
Boy.
can't replicate yourself.
Yeah. I was just I had the idea of having a show to cover our city council once a week. It came up earlier today, and I couldn't even like form a response. I said, just let me get through this election period
Yeah.
staying just a
Yeah.
couple more weeks, and I'll think about it.
I hear you. Yeah. So I kind of want to pivot for a second. And, we've talked about what you're doing in Petersburg, but I want to talk about the conservative movement overall. I mean, I've seen that you and I and Sonny and a bunch of others kind of have similar missions, like when it comes to changing minds on the right, when it comes to the Black community. How is that? Talk to me about how that's been for you. I mean, being one of the people that because I see you going back and forth with the conservatives on social media quite a bit, and I'm sure you're doing it in person too. So how has that journey been for you? I mean, tell me just tell me about how it's been for you.
How has that journey been? A lot of times for some of these debates, that's why I pointed out that, I'm busy, and, I don't have the time to be going back and forth with folks. I was a district and statewide delegate. Um, so in part, I say that, you have what you represent, um, you know, as a person, policy wise, and as much as possible, try to shoot that up the chain. Um, and you give your commentary on what type of, legislation that you, have thoughts about. We just had a delegate speak at our committee meeting
Mhm.
um, last week. And so again, it's a little more productive to do that, to have those conversations. For Lobby Day here in Virginia, it's the day whereby the offices are open, and you can come in and speak to whomever.
Hmm.
And I was out for lobby day, and I was with my candidate, January 20th, I think. I think it was MLK's birthday. And it was also a 2A march, protest, whatever, going on outside. I was out there for 7 hours um,
Wow.
in the cold. So my point being, I marched all through the building to speak to whoever would speak to our campaign. We had our issues, and so there we were with our state government speaking to everyone. So any type of surface level debate that one can have with my neighbors or whatnot, or disagreements, in my opinion, I felt that my time was better served in speaking to them. Just like
Hmm.
when they called into our committee meeting, I had my questions to ask her. So I think that's the most productive way of handling it. And what was the question?
Well, I mean, yeah,
In getting through my thoughts of the current conservative movement.
yeah, basically how the conservative movement kind of, well, a lot of the misconceptions that the conservative movement has about the Black community that has kind of
Right.
contributed to the approach that they've had to Black America. You see me talking to conservatives a lot about that, and you do too. How has it been for you trying to change minds on the right to get them to see the Black community as it really is, and to get them to understand the importance of actually reaching out to the Black community?
So for one, I love the fact that Sonny Johnson was in the White House speaking to the
Yes.
president. And I think the day that it happened, she just wrote me a message saying that she was going to be speaking to the president, and she didn't say when. And I was I think I was walking around the house cleaning. And I said, okay, congratulations. And I didn't look at my phone. And then I just walked in front of the TV, and I thought I heard her voice. And I said, oh,
Well, you can't miss her voice.
I thought this might have been 3 weeks from now, something like that. Oh, it's now. It's 45 minutes later. Um, but she is someone who has been in this, for a long time, and she said exactly what she felt that the issues were, without any type of behind kissing. Uh, and that's how it should be. As far as misconceptions with the Black community, um, there are some folks that are troublesome. I don't even know if I can begin to explain how they are problematic. Um, you know, Black people are not the enemy. Um, I, I would say that, for example, with Hopewell, there are people who are, well, both Hopewell and Petersburg. There are people who look at these cities, and when trying to determine what the problem is, they see a city with mostly Black people, and they see Black elected officials, and so just by process of elimination, well, that must be the problem. And so, there are some Black people. For instance, I was on the Nextdoor app, and I wrote something about, like, a number of racist things I came across in the first 24 hours of being in this app, including a Black woman saying that us having Black leaders was the problem. I said, what is the matter with you? And I get this stuff a lot around here because, for one, we're a Black city, but we're surrounded. This is the one, we're near the capital of the Confederacy. It's a bunch of white cities around here. And so I just get a lot of this highly racialized rhetoric all of the time. That's just times 30 of anything that I'm ever used to. But I feel like people know that, Blacks are not, we're not the problem, we're not the enemy. And it's just that that's how they look at it. The Republicans need to be fighting. We need to be fighting Democrats. And so since Blacks are mostly Democrat, well, then by default, then Blacks are the enemy. And anything that the Black
Okay.
person opens their mouth to say must be fought. And that is just how I see this. And I don't see it as necessarily being racist. It's just it's an extremely lowbrow way of looking at politics. But there are a lot of
Right.
people who think that. they think that way. And I've spent a lot of time in talking to folks, and I study history, and I explain to people about some of what's happened in some of these communities, and it causes them to think differently, and they thank me
Hmm.
for it. But it's just that this is what people have seen, and they have just grown to sort of accept the fact that it's the people that we see that are the problem. You know, it's it's the Black folks, and I encourage folks to learn history, to know the areas um, that they're operating in. You can't solve something if you don't know what happened and what happened
True.
to get it there in the first place. And there's nothing else that I can. Um, there's just no other way that I can explain it. You know, there are people who talk about the income disparity among races. And I see a lot of people who, you know, they get online and they start barking about, you know, just this excuse. Stop talking about what the government didn't do. Get up, get up and go work or something. And I say that it that's fine to say that people should do, but it doesn't include how we got here. It's assuming that this disparity came just out of laziness, you
Right.
know.
Right.
One group, it's just the misconception of one group being more productive than the other. I explained how one thing that happened in a lot of Black cities came out of DC. And that is like the slum clearance and whatnot of the 40s and 50s and beyond then. There's a Supreme Court case in DC whereby they decided to do it started with slum clearance. You know, you're just clearing slums, and in most cases they just moved the line and just took out Black communities just because the Black people were there. Go send them somewhere else. But I think it was a hardware store owner who sued, saying that my place is in a slum, so therefore you can't tear it down. And they said, the definition said to remove slums and beautification. So it's taught in colleges across the country that beautification can include practically anything we want, so I can tear down anything I want.
Oh God.
And I never hear
Yeah.
that discussed. So in turn, DC bulldozed a whole quadrant of the city, which
Mm.
you never hear about. A whole quadrant, a fourth of the city. And
Wow.
so, with that being said, that was a very large amount of the Black population and its economic center. And as we discuss things like how to fix this, I mean, a friend called me and he talked about having a nonprofit uh, by having an apartment building that was ran by a nonprofit to have subsidized rent. So I said, so just to understand, you know, how a lot of this region, how it got here, it came from removing generational wealth, what would have been, you know, money that people in this area could have to do whatever. And again, all of this was bulldozed. And that was just Southwest. And I think moving up into Northwest, I think they condemned most of Georgetown, which was
Mm.
now it's a rich white area, but they just determined all the property owners said, oh, none of these places are fit to live in. So all the Black people were gone. Um,
Wow.
and this was
Wow.
like the 20s, a little before then. So I'm like, that's what happened. And people need to at least understand, you know, what occurred first before they start all of these nasty and disgusting stereotypes of Black people, because that's just generally what it is. It's that they're trying to come up with solutions for communities they've never set foot in, don't care
Right.
what happened in, and again, they're just looking at a group of people and determining that they're the problem. And again, you know, I say that it's a loss of economic opportunity in many of these cases that cause this, and therefore creating economic opportunity and removing said barriers in doing so, because you'd be surprised the way that localities uh, stack the books up against who they want to,
Right.
removing said barriers, fix it.
Yeah, I mean, what you said makes a lot of sense. I mean, because especially well, for two reasons, really. I mean, on one level, I mean, you have the lack of the knowledge of the history. The problem is that they think that they do know the history because they're taught a skewed version of the history that leaves a lot out. I mean, especially from, a lot of our pundits and on the right, they don't give a holistic view of what happened to the Black community, because, and it's not just a matter of, oh, get up and get a job. It's, how has the government actively done things to make that more difficult? And it's interesting because we're conservatives, so we're supposed to distrust the government and acknowledge that the government, like you just said earlier in our conversation, most of the problems in the community do come from the government. So, I mean, if we're going to say that we're against the government, then we can't just say the only thing that the government has ever done to Black people was welfare and abortion and slavery and Jim Crow. No, there were a lot of different local government, state government, and federal government policies that heavily damaged Black communities to the point to where it's harder to get ahead. And guess what? Some of it was done by the Republicans, but most of it is done by the Democrats. So when they do that, they're actually defending Democrats without really even noticing it.
Oh, absolutely. No, they're giving them a whole free pass on all of that history.
But then they get mad when Democrats call them racist. Well, no, there's plenty of ammo to use against the Democrats if you knew what it was and you weren't so concerned with promoting a narrative. I mean, and the cool thing is that when a lot of conservatives, when I do tell them about some of the history, and they realize that they haven't been told the whole story, they're like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that. Maybe this isn't what I thought it was. I just need more of that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's the stereotypes, and I had found myself probably at some point last year, I was hearing things. Folks are saying stuff about their neighbors, and I was really getting sick of it. And as I said, a lot of times people use the demographics here. Every so often in conversation, they say that, well, this is a majority Black city. It's a majority Black elected officials. Like there's one white city council member, and so, they say, well, how can it be racist? And I point out to people that, okay, well, in DC was also majority Black. And there are many instances of the white, well, number one, all throughout history, it was a white minority that was terrorizing people in the first place, within the majority Black city. So that's historically ignorant. But just from my own knowledge in DC, I've watched a white minority really sit and plan and scheme, to tear up and destroy these neighborhoods. One of them was 8th Street Northeast. They put out, I remember when they were building they were building a streetcar, and at one point in time, it just took longer than expected, like years longer. And then they were almost finished, and I don't know, whatever. It was very stupid. I happened to meet a Republican running for office, and I probed her, immediately. I asked her about this project, and she told me that, oh, most of the businesses on 8th Street I brought there. And so I thought, oh, she doesn't know what she walked herself into, because the history is that was a Black business district that no longer is. So it sounds like you really walked into something there. And I said, well, what happened to the businesses that were, that were there? And she said, we offered business relief there. I said, okay, what year did that happen? 2011. I said, so you start tearing up the street in 2007, and who was able to stay there for 4 years on a street that you couldn't even access? And I'm a new Republican here, and there's this woman. I said, don't nobody ask me to support this woman. Like, these are parts of history that I have to explain, because, as I said, I get these just horrible, disgusting stereotypes, about Blacks all the time, which has me digging so far into history. For one, I started, it was Blacks in Petersburg. I hadn't done as much with it as I would like, but just to tell people, you need to be involved in your local government, because, for one, you need to hear the stuff that these people are saying about you. Okay, they are saying stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you're saying it in front of me, and someone else needs to see this. Someone else needs to be in the room to hear this. So I'm going to start bringing people in. Folks are saying stuff in city council meetings. You all need to be in there to hear that too.
Yeah.
Um, because people plot and scheme along with the government against neighborhoods, and in many cases, as throughout history, Black neighborhoods. And so again, I try to tell the conservatives that are around me the things that they're doing, or things that they promote, where I'm like, this goes along a long line of history of ways the government has actively worked to harm the community, and I won't let anyone do it, including my own party.
Yes.
So
Yes.
history matters. And when I'm telling you not to do something, it's because I've seen it happen before. I had to
Right.
explain to our former chairman about why gentrification was bad. And I don't understand how you can be over a party in a, oh Lord, thought of what I did. Uh, Sorry. Why do you not know this? Oh, but it's okay. Not everyone quite gets all the details. Not everyone really digs into this. I've been sold these lies before. Oh yeah,
Right.
we're building this $1 billion stadium in the hood for you. This is for you all. And then instead you end up getting $800,000 townhomes, and no one can afford to live in the neighborhood anymore.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it kind of wasn't for me. Okay, I'm just saying. I'm only pointing out history here, folks.
Yeah. That's all you can do sometimes. But yeah. So gonna have to head out now, but I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, because I really benefited from your experience here, because there's a lot that I didn't know, and in a lot of these interviews I'm learning a lot. So I really appreciate you sharing a lot of that with me. We got to have you back on, because I'm pretty sure throughout your career there are tons of different conversations and things that we can learn. But before we head out, if you want to just give your social media and let people know where they can find you.
Absolutely. I am on Twitter, Facebook, sure everywhere else as JaVonni Brustow. And again, I'm with the Petersburg GOP, and my website for celebrity news is popglitz.com.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks again. You have a good one.
Absolutely, you too.